feeling good. Feels nice compared to the 0-degree weather, I would say. But before we jump into today's topic, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items with everyone and kind of just explain again why we do these seminars and why these seminars kind of mean so much to us and our real estate team and our education partners that help partner with us on this. So high level, we do these seminars to help educate, equip, and empower older adults and their families so they are able to make more confident decisions in the future as we age. They're not rush decisions, not pressure-filled decisions, just confident and informed decisions. So obviously education is at the core of these. That's why we do them. And our team currently right now is the only real estate team in Jasper County to be hosting an ongoing purely educational senior living series like this. And we're just genuinely grateful to be able to offer this resource to not just the Monroe community, but the overall Jasper County area. So one note is our team made custom 3-ring binders, and this was a new thing that we were trying out in 2026. And everyone received them at the last seminar. And it's basically designed to help you stay organized as we move throughout the topics throughout the year. So it's got a full-on schedule, has the topics for the next 12 months, has a note sheet in there so you can take notes and just keep everything organized. If anyone in here does not have one and wants one, we can get you one. We have extras. So just feel free to see us after the seminar and grab one. One thing we did also, another housekeeping item, I guess, that we wanted to touch on was, so last year we kind of brought up the topic of what we're calling a senior living education downsizers club. And last year we kind of talked about it and nothing really came of it. So we wanted to rethink through the idea and how we could actually make it a possibility for those around us, I guess. So we are officially going to be starting the Downsizers Club, Senior Living Education Downsizers Club. It's going to start on March 19th, and we're going to be hosting it at Park Center, who's one of our education partners. And really, this club exists for people who are downsizing or a move is likely in the future within the next 6 months, 1 year to 5 years. And it's high level, just going to go over the downsizing process in a lot more detail than these seminars do, and just more step-by-step way. So just designed for people who want to go beyond the surface level education of these and just take time to thoroughly discuss how the downsizing process actually works and just have a little bit more one-on-one guidance. We're going to build it around having a small, more intimate group, and it's going to be more like workshop style meetings. So it's going to be we're actually going to be doing things and inside of those meetings. And we are going to limit it to 8 households so it stays more personable and practical, because it just allows us to connect with everybody there one-on-one. So it's less, so we can just have more in-depth conversations, I guess, if that makes sense. We'll meet the third Thursday of every month at Park Center from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And the first one's going to start March 19th. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to see us afterwards, and we can give you more information about what that actually means. And then we also have one-page handouts that are kind of spread out. So there's more information there as well. But yeah, any more questions, just feel free to see me after this event. Another housekeeping item before we jump into today's topic is as this series continues to grow and we're able to get more education partners who just have kind of the same heart behind this, we are still looking and exploring different locations. We don't have anything finalized yet, but our intention really is just to be proactive with everybody that's been coming to these seminars, and we just want to be transparent as we plan ahead and look for the future. Just because we don't want it to be a surprise, I guess, in saying that, hey, we're going to go to a new location now. So high level, just looking for a place that has good parking, it's ADA compliant, and allows us to reach more people and have a little bit bigger space. And obviously, we're incredibly grateful for the Gathering Place and the board of the Gathering Place and all the volunteers that make it run how it does. So we the series wouldn't even be possible without the Gathering Place. But we're moving into that next phase and just trying to be able to serve more community members in Jasper County. So yeah, that's kind of what is going on with the new location. So it's to be determined, but just trying to be proactive and transparent with everyone. And so yeah, last month we touched on, that's actually for this month. That's all right. Last month we touched on with the January seminar, it was the psychology behind letting go. And if you were here, from my perspective, the conversation necessarily wasn't an easy one in that we all have a lot of ties to things, and it was about how to actually let go of things. And choosing to downsize, or even not choosing to downsize, is hard for anyone to do. For many people, the decision sometimes will represent like their final move, like this is the last move that they're going to make. So it's just a lot of emotions behind that move. So one moment that stood out to myself was hearing from Marlene, who was a panelist last month, and she is a current resident at Park Center. And she shared honestly about how difficult the overall downsizing process was for her. And one thing that struck me the most was this, and she reached a point to where she realized she could either let the circumstances make the decision for her, or she could step into the decision herself. She recognized the situation that she was in, and she recognized it was just kind of the right time for her. And instead of reacting and having decisions being made for her, she chose to be in control of that process. And that's kind of how that's kind of how her mindset shifted. And kind of what these seminars are designed to do is just help you guys and everybody else just take control of the situation as much as you can. So we did also start implementing these new feedback forms, and those were awesome. We read through all of them, and we had a lot of people turn them in last month, and I just wanted to read a few takeaways directly from the ones that were turned in. So some things that people wrote down, these are exact quotes. They were being purposeful in preparing to move, look forward, not backwards, learn something new every day, keep the small items that make you happy, tell your family or friends if something is special to you and who you'd like it to go to. If no one wants it, then donate it or sell it. Make your own decisions, gain ideas on how to get rid of personal treasures. And I thought those were not small reflections. I thought they were big mindset shifts for people, and mindset is often what determines kind of how the season / next chapter could feel less overwhelming and or less stressful. So I thought that was good feedback and takeaway that we took from everybody, which kind of leads us into today's topic, which is how to know when it's time to make a move. And it's not, I think I might have said this last week, or I feel like I've said before, but it's not telling anyone what they should do, because nobody likes to be told what to do, obviously. Everybody has a plan A, and most of the time we're not really thinking of a plan B or plan C, but it's good that you're here and getting this information, kind of telling me that most people are planning for a plan B or C. So today it's just about how to help us recognize signs, understand timing, and gain clarity so decisions don't get made for you later down the road. So with that, I just want to invite our panelists up. Each of them brings a unique perspective and a deep level of experience working with older adults. So just want to give a round of applause real quick for our panelists as they come up.
Slept up.
And before we dig into the discussion questions, just ask each of them to prepare just a little brief overview about who you are, what you do, who you work with, and then if you want to keep the introductions to 1 to 3, 4 minutes, and then just to help give everybody context about who you are, who you work with, and we can go from there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kathleen Matthews. I am a clinical psychologist who specializes in working with older adults, usually those 65 plus, but there is actually quite a range. I was at the VA, Veterans Affairs, for the past 15 years, spent my career there, and decided to take a leap, open my own private practice in West Des Moines. I have a pretty specialized practice where I offer services like cognitive evaluations, therapy, and caregiver support groups and individual. My clients are specifically those with suspected or confirmed dementia diagnosis and or their caregivers. So caregivers are equally clients at Perennial Pathways. I should say the name of my business. It is Perennial Pathways. I'm still new at this, being an entrepreneur. But yeah, so I'm located in West Des Moines. I have something called the Heart at Home program, where for qualifying clients, I will bring my psychology services to their home. There can be a lot of access barriers, and we're trying to prevent those. So that is me. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Aker. I am a speech language pathologist, and I started my own private practice as well. It's called Brain Bridge Therapy. I really enjoy clients who have had a traumatic brain injury or stroke and they're rehabbing from that.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Beat, and I work with Wesley Life, and I am a sales manager who gets to go out to all of the Wesley Life communities, which is awesome. So I work with Montessa and Lisa in the back whenever they need. So I help brainstorm, just be a support for any of the communities. There are 10 Wesley Life communities in Iowa. So I traveled throughout going there and just a spot where we can work together, just knowing they have someone that they can reach out to if they have questions. And I have been in the healthcare industry for many years, and I had the chance to work in like an assisted living that was a standalone to now working in CCRC. So it's nice that I have some ideas for all levels and all views. And I like to do these type of things to help people know what to look for.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll just start off and we're gonna go into talking about like when the question actually shows up about like how do people actually know when it's time to make a move and what does that actually look like? So Kathleen, in your work with older adults and caregivers, what are the earliest psychological and or cognitive signs that suggest someone should begin questioning whether their current living situation still fits?
Yeah. So as far as cognition is concerned, what I advocate for, just in general, is early planning. So just because there are signs of dementia or a diagnosis, I just want to give the caveat. But I am a huge proponent of starting early so that one, the individual has the ability to participate in those discussions and what their goals are, as well as to not have to respond to crises, right? So not have to make a last minute decision or a forced decision. So early on, some of the earliest signs to look for are changes in memory. That's the one that everyone knows, right? But there's a lot of changes in memory that can occur, and these are fairly specific. So it's losing the ability to remember how to do really well learned things, or for example, misplacing items, but being unable to retrace your steps, right? Showing that you're not forming new memories there. It goes beyond just, forgetting someone's name, especially the newer people you meet, or lapses in memory sometimes. If they're having a lot of problems planning or problem solving, that can be a really important sign. So these are things like bills are starting to not get paid, medications aren't being correctly managed, cooking, favorite recipes are hard to like work through those steps. Um, Familiar tasks are huge. Like if you're an avid card player and you're starting to forget the rules, that could be something to look for. And confusion about date, time. You often think this is later in the dementia process, but can happen early and it's easy to write off, right? I'm retired. I don't know what day it is, or 2022, 2024. I've been around so long. Doesn't matter, that sort of thing. So these are some of the things to look for with cognition. And it can also be things like memory's fine, but there's spatial relations. You're having issues with spatial relations, bumping into walls, falling up and down stairs, having trouble parking the car, things like that. Difficulties with speaking, word finding that goes beyond just time to time and is interfering with communication. And then judgment, people making decisions that maybe falling for scams or they are giving away large sums of money, those sorts of things. And people don't always think this, but changes in personality of behavior. People can have their memories fine, they're seeming their visual spatial abilities are fine, but they don't seem like themselves. There's a radical change. The thing that's really important is that these overlap with the psychological things to look for. So this beyond persistent sadness, if someone's depressed, that can look like dementia, right? That can impact cognition. For older adults, depression can look like increased irritability, increased pain and aches that are, not able to find a cause. Talking about deceased loved ones a lot, it can look different. But loss of interest in things you love and enjoy, these are all parts of depression. They can be parts of dementia. And then finally, anxiety, if you're having persistent worries that are hard to control, panic attacks. These are all things that can be changed. I call them undue burdens. You don't have to live with these things, but and it could help keep you or your loved one in the home. But if these are persisting, if there's social isolation, persistent mental health concerns, and noted cognitive decline, and it's identified as a progressive condition, it's time to start thinking about it and talking about it.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of those signs kind of show up quietly, and they just kind of sneak up on you. Emily, as a SLP working with older adults, what, from your perspective, like what changes in communication, memory, or just like overall daily function do you notice that make it harder for someone to live independently in their home?
Yeah, so things that make it harder living at home. She mentioned some of the cognitive things, and that's a lot of what I do as a speech pathologist, is help people with their cognition and memory. So I won't get too into a lot of the things she said. I second what she said. But memory, like she said, like if you're having a hard time with word finding, but it's so much so that it's hard to have a conversation, then that's something that should be looked into. And memory for doctor appointments, medications, things like that that are going to then also impact other areas of your health as well. But aside from that, I would also mention hearing. Hearing loss is a really big issue for people that a lot of times I don't think people realize some of the other things that hearing loss can then lead to. So if there is hearing loss, if you have concerns about that, there are things that can be done. I know you guys know about hearing aids, but there are other options as well and other things. So if that's a concern, talk to someone and find ways to kind of get around that and get on top of that, because hearing loss can lead to other things. And it's also a safety concern too. If you're not hearing an alarm, or if you're not hearing the ambulance when you're driving, or honking when you're driving, then that's a safety concern too. Also, vision can be a really big thing for people, and balance and mobility. Those all make it harder living at home, and they just increase that safety risk when you're home, especially also if you're home alone. If you are by yourself and something happens, then you have to think about, what do you do? What do you do then? How are you getting a hold of someone? How are you getting help? And just have a plan plan ahead for how that might look, what your options are, so that way, if and when something does happen, you have already thought about what to do in that situation, and you're not just panicking, and you've thought about it before. So
Yep. Trying to be a little bit more proactive than reactive in that situation. Now we have kind of the awareness side. or awareness on the emotional side and then kind of the functional side. Lindsay, from the senior living side perspective, what typically prompts individuals or families to finally reach out and start asking questions about like actually making that move?
Yeah. So we all probably know it often becomes something of a crisis. Something happens where a family member notices it, or you notice, or a neighbor notices a change. Maybe someone's had a fall, something like that. But I don't want to say that's the only reason, because I love that people are here to learn. And there's much more of this going on now because people want to have a plan, even though it's scary to know that that could be your plan and know it scares people. It is wonderful to have that plan. So these steps of coming to these educations and learning what's out there, what you guys can do, is a wonderful thing to start. There are still many people that wait for that last, crisis to happen. But that's why all these educations are out there, is we really are trying to help show you that there are positives to a community, and there are positives if you want to stay home, but we want to have a plan in place. So I'm lucky to work for Wesley Life, where there are communities, and yes, I work with the communities, but there are also services to keep you in your home and be safe. And there's many services out there all across Iowa where they want to keep you as safe as possible and have what your plan is, whatever that plan may be able to work for you for the rest of your life. So the first step is being at a place like this and learning. So you guys are already learning every month, I know, so that's wonderful. But just don't wait till that crisis happens or something occurs. That's obviously not the ideal situation.
Yep. And I think we did last year, we did an aging in place one, which was really good. There's a company in Newton called Home Instead, and they came in and talked about a lot of things about how to age in place and best practices and stuff. So I think we're doing another aging in place one. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think we are. So kind of to transition into a different subject, I guess, for thinking about like the actual cost of staying in your house and what it actually looks like to manage. Because many people tell themselves that I'm fine and I can manage, even though it is becoming harder to live in their home. So Kathleen, psychologically, why do people often normalize stress, anxiety, or exhaustion related to their home instead of recognizing those feelings as potentially meaningful signals to take action?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of contributing factors to that. And I think a really big one is the stigma and a lot of false beliefs in our culture around what it means to age. And so I think that is one part of it. There's too much normalizing hardship, the things I call those undue burdens in our culture, that's part of getting older, and it's not. Stress, exhaustion, anxiety, these are things that could be addressed and you shouldn't have to deal with alone. So I think that's one, and it's not a normal part of aging. So it's important to be aware of that. I think the other thing too is it is a deeply American value, Western culture value, to have autonomy, freedom, choice, and independence. And that's a lot of value that people hold, a value that people hold dear many times. I'd say the vast majority of clients I've ever seen. I don't know if I've ever met with someone who said my goal is to leave my house as soon as possible. And so I think that's a part of it. And I'll be talking more about this. You talk about aging in place, a huge initiative in this country. There's also something called the 4Ms, which talks about focusing on what matters to an older adult, what's important. And a lot of times it is this value of being able to make choices, autonomy, and having one's own home is a huge part of that. And so the other things to think of too is like just the magnitude of the loss and the change. Like it disrupts familiar routines. People are concerned about that freedom being taken away, a loss of independence, and there's just this push-pull, right? And all of us are talking about pre-planning and this idea that, You don't want to be pushed into a move, right? This idea of wanting to be able to plan moving forward. And you're just in this push pull between wanting independence a lot of time and declines in ability that are making it harder to manage at home. And I think having a conversation about that and acknowledging it as a real thing, not saying like, oh, it's time to move. Like, how would you feel if somebody came over and said that to you? You know, I wouldn't like it. I want to stay in my house. So I think that's really important. Also, I think it's when you're living with yourself or someone else you're caring for, or just a loved one you're not caring for, it's hard to see incremental changes, you know, in the day to day. A lot of times it is adult children coming home for a visit and noting, you know, changes and concerns. It is very, very hard to notice those when they're so incremental. And so that's not denial per se. That's more of just it's hard to see. Yeah, so I think those are some of the key things. I will be talking about the next question, another reason. Stay tuned. It looks like denial, but it's not dementia.
Emily, and good, it was a good answer. Emily, when you're working with older adults in their home, because obviously you do go into a lot of homes, what tells you someone is managing just like day to day, but doing so at a cognitive, physical, or emotional cost for their just like overall well-being?
Yeah. So someone that's living at home and they're managing, but doing so at a cost. What are the signs that it's costing them in different ways? And she kind of talked about some psychological things. You know, if they're having a lot of anxiety, a lot of worries, and that's affecting them psychologically, then that's a cost. Is social isolation. If you're I think I heard one time, I'm not sure how factual this is, but I heard that being socially isolated is as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And I didn't fact check that, but I do think, you know, there are a lot of detriments to not having a social connection in the community with your family. And that doesn't have to be the case. So just being aware of that and doing something about that, having connections, having conversations, getting out, meeting people, really, really important. So the social isolation can be a cost. Another cost, exhaustion. The things that have been just part of daily life, cooking, cleaning, showering, getting dressed, getting ready, all of those things, if they're becoming exhausting and you got to take a nap after getting ready, that's a cost. You know, so you kind of and if those things become a safety risk for you also, that's a big cost. So you kind of need to weigh all of those things, and you need to be really honest with yourself, which I think can be hard, which is where sometimes I think family members can be really have a really good input, because sometimes it's hard to be honest with yourself in self-reflection, and where if you have a trusted loved one to say like, no, I think you're doing good, you know, maybe you're being too hard on yourself, or yeah, I am noticing that too. What can we do about it? And just having those conversations, because even though you know, we're sitting up here talking about all of these things that can be super concerning, there are things that can be done. There are people that can help, but in order to get the help and in order to make improvements in these areas, we have to first like be honest about the fact that they're there in order to do something about them.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot easier to see things in other people than it is yourself. And what Kathleen said earlier, I was having a conversation with someone about how it's always when the kids come home for Thanksgiving and when the kids come home for Christmas is kind of when things can pop up, because if you're not seeing, you know, if you don't see your parents every single day and you only see them Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's a lot easier to see changes that have happened. another point that I wanted to make as well was like we're made to be like we're made for relationships, like we're made to be together. So yes, I would echo what you said about that piece. And for Lindsay, when people delay exploring senior living options and figuring out that, what trade-offs do you see them making that they may not fully realize in that moment?
So I will third that. Social isolation is a huge one. When people start pulling away, maybe from going to a church group or going and playing cards, maybe they're not able to drive anymore. They might seem like little things that they're stopping, but in general, that is a huge concern because it's isolating someone at home, especially if they're alone, or even if there's one person there. You know, there may not be a lot of communication happening. The day to day is just an isolating feeling, which can then cause depression and those type of things. So that's a huge one. I will also say eating meals. I hear all the time, well, I don't really make much because I don't want to cook for myself, or there's not someone I'm cooking for, so I eat some snacks or things like that. That's a concern because that can really affect your health. And a big thing that can come with moving into a community when that time comes is 3 quality meals a day. People around, groups to join. Both of those differences can make a huge difference when someone moves in. They might not think it's going to make that big of a difference, but you start being around people, you go and get good quality, healthy meals, change. It can change how people act. It can change how people feel. And it makes a huge difference. Another trade-off is all of the, and yes, I'm speaking on community-based. No one wants to move into a community typically. They want to stay home as long as possible. We know that. We fully understand. But we also want people to notice when you go, if you go in and you view a community, you tour a community, the positives to it, which is that social aspect, the meals, and also just take into account all of the, someone has to come do your snow removal, your mowing of the grass, anything that breaks in your house. All of that stress can be a lot more heavy on you that you might not even know. Maybe you have a kid that does it, but what if they're busy? What if they're sick? The nice part of a community is all of that is on the community, and you're able to truly not have to worry about that in the back of your mind. You may not worry much. Maybe there's not a lot of concern to it. But when you fully don't have to worry about it at all, it is a lot of weight off someone's shoulders to just know it's handled, to know there's a phone call away and someone's coming to fix the refrigerator or the microwave. You don't have to go outside in the cold, or you need a driver and they are able to drive you somewhere. So those type of things are trade-offs that not always are we thinking about. One other thing I would say is obviously cost is always brought up. We know that. And healthcare is expensive. It is. Always take into account the extra bills that you may be paying at home that are just a normal bill that's coming out that you may not fully even, I mean, I have normal bills that are coming out and I don't add them up to know what they are. If you add them all up, how much does that cost in a month to then put into what the community could take off your plate? Yes, you're paying usually a monthly fee, but you're not paying for all those little costs adding up either. So something to think about that we don't always recognize or put down on paper and see what it comes out to be as a total. So those are some of the trade-offs I would say that people might not realize they're making when they decide to not move in at that moment or not look at communities.
I think those trade-offs often tie directly into safety and awareness. So that's kind of where we will shift the conversation next. So Kathleen, when cognitive changes are present and like we know that they're there, how does insight or the lack of it affect someone's ability to accurately judge their own safety and independence?
Yeah, it's a huge factor in deciding if somebody has, what in psychology we look at someone's capacity or ability, so independent living capacity. Insight is very huge. And there's a big fancy word. I said that I was going to talk about we were discussing the psychological reasons why people might not take into account all these warning signs. But there are also neurocognitive reasons in dementia, and it looks an awful lot like denial. So it's something called asognosia. So ASOGNOSIA. It's a big fancy word, which just literally means that due to brain changes, not psychological reasons, but brain changes, the person has an inability to understand their impairments. It's not denial. So I can have many clients who will come in and they'll say, they have poor memory, they lack insight, poor judgment, and then in the next sentence say they're in complete denial about the fact that they can't drive or that it's time to move. And so that's really important for when you're working with a loved one or discussing with a loved one the potential need to move, is that if they're saying, I don't have any problems, I'm not doing it, all those things. If you've ever been a caregiver for someone with dementia, it's come up. I see some nods. It's not the individual trying to be difficult, or just in denial. And it's part of the way their brain is changing, which will lead into how to have these conversations, because you do have to change your track. But so this lack of insight that comes from brain changes creates a number of safety concerns because it is related to poor judgment, right? If I don't think I have problems driving and my doctor says I can no longer drive, but he's wrong and I get my keys and I drive, people say that's poor judgment, but it's also the lack of insight into anything being wrong. And so these discussions around moving can be very painful and just feel like you're going round and round and round because you're trying to reason, convince, use logic, and that's never going to go anywhere because the part of the brain that deals with that is not there. So the real safety concerns that can come up here are things like engaging in daily tasks that are no longer safe, like cooking, driving, things like that, climbing up a ladder to try and fix the roof, those sorts of things. There's also vulnerability to fraud, financial exploitation. I mentioned earlier, scams. It's just pervasive. It's horrible, but it's a day-to-day thing. And so giving out more information than they maybe should, letting strangers into the home, giving money away. These are things that, though it's related to this lack of insight and poor judgment from brain changes that can lead to significant safety concerns there. So yeah, I think that it's just really important to recognize for those with those cognitive changes, it's really common for them to lack the ability to recognize that they have them. And that in turn changes how we approach these things. So there you go.
Emily, from your perspective, I guess, is there anything else you want to echo from what Kathleen said, or just anything else where you see, just like from a communication standpoint, that are common challenges that, increase the safety / awareness?
Yeah. So I echo what she said as far as the decision making and just not thinking fully through the consequences or potential consequences of different decisions. And just, like she said, getting on a ladder, that might be something that you've done for forever, but let's just pause for a second and think about self-assess and assess the situation. Are there other ways to go about doing this? And just kind of think through possible consequences of choices. And sometimes that could be easier said than done. So, but something to consider. And then memory for safety risk, from a safety risk standpoint. You see people who they forget to close the garage door or leave things unlocked or leave the stove or the oven on or forget to blow out a candle, things like that. And that is gonna, can potentially lead to safety concerns. So there's definitely a memory component of that also. But then from my standpoint, I see a lot of people as a speech pathologist who have had a stroke or a brain injury. And so the other thing that I wanted to mention here as a safety risk is not knowing the signs of a stroke. And if you don't know what those are and you don't recognize that someone else that you're living with or that you're having signs of a stroke and you don't get the medical attention that you need fast enough, then that results in, worse recovery and worse outcomes later on. Where if you do recognize it and you get the help that you need right away, you can have better recovery results. So from that standpoint, knowing the signs of a stroke is great. And then also falls is a really big safety risk as well, which I'm sure you guys have heard before, but just know that that is a thing, that is a safety concern, and be aware of, how your house is set up, making sure that there aren't any tripping hazards, and then also have a plan, like I kind of mentioned earlier. If you do have a fall, are you able to get up? If you're not able to get up, do you have a way to communicate with someone else that you need help, and kind of pre-plan what you do in that situation?
And then I guess eventually families start to then, once they get to that point, they begin to start looking outside of the home for different solutions. So when families start to actually tour senior living communities, Lindsay, what safety or future planning issues are most commonly misunderstood or overlooked?
So I will start by saying, if it's a family or friend that starts the looking at communities and the future resident is not involved in that decision process, it is very difficult. I know the ladies hear a lot where they'll be like, my mom doesn't know I'm looking, or we still have to get to that point. Totally okay to start the process first, but do know the quicker to have that conversation, the better it's going to go. A lot of times when people are doing all that research and looking and finding a place, and then you go tell your loved one, found 2 places I would like you to look, there's more harm in that than there is helpfulness. I mean, I do think you should get the person involved as soon as you can. But with that, looking at communities that you know will meet your needs. So something that I've found out more now that I have been part of CCRCs is assisted livings where you maybe need a little bit more assistance. Some people don't, but you're there and able to have it. They're harder to get into in a CCRC. So in a full continuum of care community where it has every level, they stay much more full because they're able to move a resident to that living if it's needed. So if you're looking for a level of living that has all the levels, a community that has all the levels, start that search and know where you want to be. Because if you're wanting to go into a certain level that's not independent living, it may be harder to get into. That is just the realization of it. I worked for a standalone assisted living, and I feel like those have much more openings because it's a one level of living and you don't have a nursing care attached. You don't have skilled care attached. But the CCRCs that have a full continuum of care, it is harder to get into those levels if you aren't there in the independent living side. With that, though, I want to say a misunderstood piece is even 5 years ago, I would say, you would move into a level of living and your thought was you're going to for sure go through the levels. Everyone's really trying, every community outside of Wesley Life. I know other communities are too. They're trying to do everything they can to keep you in that level of living, if it's independent, if it's assisted, for as long as possible with outside care coming in. So it is not as much of I'm moving into independent, I know I'm going to have to move to assisted, and then I know I'm going to have to move to the health center. It isn't looked at that way anymore in the aspect of we all want you to stay wherever you call home. So if that's an independent living or assisted living, we're going to do everything in our power to keep you there safely and legally. But it is much more of a misconception. They think of in a CCRC where I'm going to move in and then when I start needing care, they're moving me throughout the system. That isn't the full true story anymore because there are outside services. Wesley at Home, Home Instead. There are services out there that can come into communities and give you that care if you need in even independent living. Just because you're independent doesn't mean you don't need a little bit of help here and there. It's okay to have that in independent living, and still we believe you can live there. So that's a misconception that I'm only going to start looking when I need the help and when I need a lot of help. That's not the case. So that's something I would keep in mind.
Yep. One other comment as you were talking, I was thinking about. So when we got our certification to be a certified senior housing professional, we had the task of touring basically a bunch of different senior living communities, and we toured a decent amount inside central Iowa, and then more in like Jasper County and more rural Iowa. And something that we found that I thought was interesting is like there was, and this was a year ago, so it might have changed by now, but there was, like, when you're actually starting to go tour these communities, the ones in central Iowa, from my experience, they didn't have a wait list, or as big of one at least. But as you start getting into the more rural communities and you start touring those communities, those ones, like, a lot of them have a wait list. So it's good to just be proactive and starting those conversations and tours and looking at them and just putting your name on the wait list, even if you aren't 100% sure that you want to go there. Especially if you're looking to stay in more rural Iowa versus like moving to Des Moines. So that's just my perspective on that. And Lindsay kind of brought up the family perspective, so we'll transition into that. So we'll talk about family, timing, and just overall peace of mind, and just starting those conversations early with your family or with your friends or your community that you're surrounded with. So Kathleen, how do caregiver stress, family dynamics, and unspoken expectations complicate these decisions that people have to make, and what helps families have healthier conversations earlier? Kind of a loaded question.
It's a big question.
Excuse me. As far as caregiver stress, it is one of the number one predictors of placement in long-term care for a loved one with dementia. Not to mention all the detrimental effects of it on the caregiver over time, but it can lead to premature placement before someone necessarily needs to be is ready for that level of care. So it's very important to recognize that and know that it's an undue burden. We can address caregiver distress, stress, and burnout. Family dynamics are huge because a lot of education, it talks about the importance of these conversations. But when you get down to the individual families, people have their roles, they have the dynamics. It might be things like, the matriarch or patriarch was always in charge and making the decisions, and now they have dementia. They lack the insight into the fact that they even have impairment, but they're still running the bus, right? Driving the bus. That can be a way that dynamics can make those conversations difficult, or a lack of understanding into dementia and how that impacts your loved one's decision-making abilities. That can contribute to difficulties with these conversations. Again, I mentioned it, but it's like everyone feels like a fight and like you're spinning the wheels, you're not getting anywhere, because the goal is to get to a rational decision when the brain's unable to do that. And so these family dynamics are huge. And then expectations. So those can go in a lot of different ways. So one, I mentioned earlier, expectations that like these undue burdens are a normal part of aging, right? This is just part of what my lot is because I've lived long enough. And so that's part of the expectations that can either push for long-term care placement sooner than it's needed, or a transition, or lead to someone not realizing it might be time for a move. It could go either way. Also, expectations of duty and responsibility, right? Like I have the duty to keep my mom, my dad at home. They took care of me. I'll take care of them. All while caregiver stress and burnout is making you less able to offer the support they need to stay where they are. So these are all really important. What I would say as far as facilitating conversations, healthier conversations earlier, is that the person, if the discussion about moving is not initiated by the person who has to move, I think it's really important to come from a place of first listening with respect and acknowledging what they want, what their goals are, right? I think too many times older adults get left out of the conversation, who are perfectly able to, or maybe they have dementia and people write them off as able to, but they can still contribute to the degree possible. And so I think that putting their values and goals at the center of the discussion and seeing how you can support that. So whether it's aging in place and then saying, okay, I know this is a goal, and instead of dismissing it right away, say, let's look at what you need to do that successfully and safely. Or if the goal is aging in place, but that doesn't align with their goal to maintain their mobility because they're at high risk for falls. They've already fallen and had an injury. And if it happens again, maybe their goal to remain mobile will be impacted. And so talking about those things. When we're talking about dementia and someone's lack of insight, this is something I work on a lot with families and caregivers, is that the goal of the conversation changes. Yes, the person's values, their lifelong values, what was important to them, and that's why the early conversation is important, is still at the center. Because even if you're a surrogate decision maker, the decisions are made for the person and what they would want, while balancing safety and things like that. But it's important to put it at the center, but the goal of the conversation is no longer to convince the person that it's the right time to move, because all that's going to lead to is strife and conflict and leaving bad feelings between how they feel interacting with you, right? And so identifying strategies that, respect and acknowledge and validate, and then also trying to meet their goals with the decisions you're making while leading with kindness, sometimes over the truth. And then talking, though, about how to do that with dignity. And so a lot of times I work with families on transition plans. Like, how can we make this person-centered, aligning with what is valuable to them, and making it a good transition as opposed to a traumatic one, right? So these are all the things. And so how the conversation goes really depends on the invitation. But I'll leave it at that. And I saw there was a final thing to talk about, so I'll do that.
I guess a couple comments I kind of was thinking through when you were talking was a quote that I heard about listening is, like when you're listening to someone and having a conversation with them, am I listening to reply or am I listening to understand? So it's like being intentional, like it's a little thing, but actually being intentional about not what am I going to respond, but what is this person actually saying to me? And then the other thing was that I kind of thought of about the conversations is kind of like what we talked about earlier, is it's easier to see something in someone else. So if you bring in a third party advocate to come like assist in those conversations, there's people that do that. Our real estate team does that. Sure, Wesley Life and then Kathleen and Emily would be able to do that as well. But just having that outside perspective, just see the situation is a little bit easier to for someone else to see than it might be for yourself. So then Emily, from SLP perspective, if someone is feeling overwhelmed or families feeling overwhelmed and they know that a change might be coming, what's a practical low pressure step that they can take now to try to help them gain more clarity in the situation or process?
Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind as far as a low pressure step would just be to do what you guys are doing now. So pat yourself on the back if you're exploring the options. Another step that you could take in exploring your options is just go visit. There are people at different living communities that it's their whole job to just tell you about the place. They'd love to talk to you about it. So just go without any expectations. Like she was kind of mentioning earlier, a lot of times people make a move when they have to because there's some sort of crisis. If you're able to go and just see what the options are so that you have an idea of what's out there, that's great. And like I said, there's no pressure. And I've started doing that, just like meeting people, and I've looked at some of these places, and I was honestly very surprised at how great they are. Um, they're kind of like college, but without the classes. It's just the social stuff. You're living with friends. Like, this is great. And so maybe you go and you're surprised too. So that's one thing. There are also people who, like he mentioned, a realtor, or there are different people who it's their whole jobs to help you find where to live and what the next step is. I know someone whose name's Kelly. I've got some flyers of hers, but there are other people out there who they know what the options are. They meet you, they know the personalities of the people that work at these different places, and they can kind of match you up with where you think you'll fit best. And then they can go on tours with you too, which is helpful. And then also my last point was kind of what Andy said as far as bringing in another perspective. I think that's a great idea. And I would also encourage you to maybe talk to the people that you know who are already living in different communities. If you have friends who live in assisted living and another friend who lives in independent living, call them up, ask them, what do you think? What do you like? What's good? What's not good? And just have those conversations to kind of get a feel for what's out there.
Yep. I'm going to shout out to my grandma real quick. She has a friend that lives in Deerfield, so they go there every Friday for coffee, almost every Friday. So she gets to experience what Deerfield is like, and just get their perspective on that. So, but anyways,
I love that.
Lindsay, so after a decision is made, perspective often changes from that individual. So after someone makes a proactive move, what do people most often say they wish they had understood and or done sooner?
I know you're going to think I'm just saying this, but it is very, very rare that people aren't extremely happy about the move once they've gotten settled in. It takes a while. You leave a home, apartment, wherever you're at, and you move somewhere new, there is going to be a time where it is very difficult. You're meeting new people. Your routine has changed a little, not that it has to, but it's different. It's not your house, but it doesn't mean it's a negative. It just takes a little bit of time. I know personally, in my last position, I had a lady pull out her deposit twice. And on the third time she came back, she then moved in. She got that apartment, and she was my biggest spokesperson. I mean, I would take tours up to her saying, she looked at me and said, this is not a good idea for me to move here. And when she finally moved in, she's like, why did I not do it sooner? And I know Montessa and Lisa have had the same situations, because the biggest concern people have is that they're losing all independence, and you're not. I truly, truly believe that some people gain more independent and more freedom because, say you do want to travel, you don't have to have someone looking over your house. Say you do have the burden of an older house and things need to be fixed. You don't have that burden anymore. So there is freedom with it. It's a little different, but no one's making you come out for breakfast at 7 a.m. That is not happening. It might have happened years and years and years ago, but that's not the situation anymore. It's very resident centered. What do you want your day to look like? And you can do whatever you wish in your day. So that's a big thing I hear is they think their freedom and their independence is going to be gone, and it's not. And they realize that when they move in. And I will just speak personally that there are people that move in that don't realize some of those new relationships. You may not think you need any more new friends. You don't need anyone else to visit with. I have residents from my past jobs that still text me and ask how my kids are. So there are relationships that are built, and the people that are working in these communities are there because their heart is there. And if you don't feel that, that maybe is not the community for you, because there are communities that they truly want to know more about you. They want you to know about their kids or grandkids. So it is a very good new group of people to meet that can fulfill your cup more than you even imagine. So I always think I can't even get to know I can't get together with my friends now because I'm busy with my kids. I don't need new friends. I love meeting new people. So that's for every age and anyone at any stage. Once you get to meet someone, it's a whole new life that you can talk about. So don't limit yourself, and just know that it is very, very rare if you hear someone say, I wish I wouldn't have made a move. They will say, I do miss my house. That's going to happen. We can't change that, but we're going to make that next step of whatever community you choose the homiest, best feeling that it can be, but we cannot replace your house, and we know that. So we're not going to try to. We're just going to make it a good experience for you. So.
Always say touring senior living community, from my perspective, touring senior living communities is a lot like when I take buyers out to tour homes. Most of them know within the first 2 to 5 minutes if they're going to buy it or not, buy that house. And for myself, it's kind of the same perspective that, like, once you start touring senior living communities, they all have a feel, and you can feel them out pretty quickly once you step foot inside of them and start having conversations with people there. But before we kind of wrap up, I just want to give space for 3 panelists just to touch on anything important that you feel like we haven't touched on, and if just like a final thought, insight, or whatever. If there's nothing, no worries, but yeah, feel free to share any
I
thoughts.
just want to give a little plug for a model in healthcare that I think applies with making this decision. We call it the 4M's. I mentioned it earlier. So the first M is what matters. So, knowing and aligning what you or your loved ones, specific goals, values, and what matters to you, that's at the heart of making these decisions. And I think when determining if it's time to move, if your current home environment doesn't allow you to pursue these goals, to connect with the things that matter, if it's socializing or engaging in hobbies, if living independently mattered, but now you're not connecting with the other things that do, it's a good indication. Things like medication, before deciding it's time to move, that's the second M. Look at medication. There are things all the time that cause adverse effects on an older adult's physical or cognitive functioning, and it's really important to address those because they're changeable. And so if medications are getting too complex, there's safety concerns involved, or they can be removed and things improve and the person can stay home. Look at meds. It's a weird thing to put in here, but it matters. There's also mentation. So I talked about how depression can look like dementia. Older adults in particular are at risk for deliriums. And even in dementia, things like depression, anxiety, things like that can cause worsening in symptoms that can be alleviated if treated. And so looking at mentation and making sure that things that are treatable can and maybe keep them in the home, or if mentation increases risk, and we get to these safety concerns we've been talking about. The final one is mobility, ensuring that the home environment is safe for mobility, not putting them at risk for falls, which I used that example before. If there's a fall and serious injury, then it can remove your access from the things that matter, right? And so again, changing what matters sometimes as we age, thinking of, I want to remain mobile. I know this helps with my longevity and quality of life. If my home is at risk, are there things I can change to stay here safely? Or is it time to move to a different location? So, yeah, final plug.
I just kind of wanted to wrap up with a few things. One being, I really commend you guys for all being here. This is a really great thing that Andy's hosting, and just getting prepared for the different options, educating yourself on the different options. This is a lot. A lot of changes happen as we age, and just know that you're not alone in this. And you don't have to be alone in this. There are, maybe consider going to like a counseling, a therapist, talking to someone, because this is a lot, and you don't have to go through it alone. And also, there are just so many people out there whose whole job it is to help in all different aspects of this, from speech therapy to physical therapy to counselors to people that help you find new living situations. Just the list goes on. They're dedicating their lives to helping people through this. So reach out to them. They're there. Yeah. And good job for being here.
My last thing would just be to go tour some communities, not because you want to make that be your next step, but go and look at them. They're very different. A lot are very different than you think. My dad always tells me I will not be moving anywhere. And I'm like, well, that's what I do for a living. And it's different than you think. I tell him that all the time. But go look. And just like they said, you'll feel it if you think it's a safe, warm place. It doesn't have to be the newest. It's the feeling you get when you walk in that you guys really should look for. But also know that if you're ever feeling pressure to make the move from someone that's touring, and I'm speaking because I know the ladies back there don't do that either, you shouldn't feel the pressure. It is your choice. No one wants you in our situation to live in a community you don't want to be at. That's not good for us or for you. So find a place that you feel safe, that they will help you walk through the process of maybe being ready or not being ready until when you are ready. You should never feel the pressure. And then I also want to say, every week I get a new name give it to me of someone that might not be able to, say, afford one of the 10 Wesley Life communities, but they don't know where to start. There are people out there, even me, who could talk you through situations of other communities that I know, something more in a price range, something more around an area that you're wanting to stay in. And I do know communities would also help you with that. So if you get there and the price is too high, yes, senior living is expensive. We understand that. There's a lot that comes with it though. And if it still is out of the price range, we want to help you find a place. We do not want you to be unsafe at home. So do know that if you don't have someone helping you, you always could reach out to Lisa. She could give you my name. I could help you because there's so many people that we know out in the community that the different prices, the different layouts, whatever you're looking for. So just look, know what you want as your plan so that no one has to decide it for you, because that's usually when people aren't happy, is because they didn't get to make it themselves.
Yep. Awesome. But yeah, as we wrap up, I obviously just want to thank panelists for being here today. I thought it was just cool to get three different perspectives on from SLP perspective, a psychological perspective, and then like a senior living community perspective. So hopefully it was informative today. And obviously I just want to thank you guys for your time. As you leave today, I just encourage you to keep using your 3-ring binder as well. I just love seeing people take notes and utilize it. Our panelists and education partners will stick around after for a little bit, and you can grab all of their info and keep it in your keep it in the 3-ring binders as well. And then, did you have one question?
I just want to put a plug in.
Yep.
I have a classmate who has had those things amputated. She moved back to the West End.
Part 3, how to plan your downsizing journey with confidence. We're always doing these on the first Thursday of every month. So yeah, just want to thank our panelists. If you want to give them a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for being here. Oh, I forgot to announce. We are also doing, sorry, I forgot to mention.
Yes.
I forgot to mention 2 things. First thing is we are doing a catered meal, so feel free to hang out afterwards for a meal. Not quite, I think it's soups, but I'm not quite sure. So feel free to hang out and eat a meal as well. And then another announcement here super quick is Park Center is also doing a event on how to compile all of your photos together so it's a little bit more organized, and that is on Friday, February 27th, and Lisa has more flyers back there for that. So that's all. Thank you.